Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I am Dutch,
And I'm Pops.
and welcome back for our divisional round playoff recap. We'll talk about the playoff games, what happened. We'll take a look at the conference championship rounds. But before we get into all that, you know what's up, past and present. So, Pops, it's up to you this morning. Which one do you want? You want past or you want present first?
Let's go with present.
Present. I thought this was a good one because honestly, if you guys had asked me this, I wouldn't have known it. Where did Keenan Allen go to college? The San Diego and now LA Charger
Yeah.
number one.
I think he's from Pac-12, right?
He is Pac-12.
I want to say it was either UCLA or California, because he got to stay out there. I think I'm gonna go Cal.
It is Cal, dude. Great pull.
Hey.
What a pull. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was sitting back and I saw that and I was like, honestly, I don't remember him at Cal at all.
Yeah.
It's just, if you say Cal wide receiver, the guy that comes to my mind is Deshaun Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the number one guy that sort of comes in. But great pull.
And really, all you feel too is a little bit Jared Goff time when he was out there as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. But
obviously, Marshawn,
tremendous.
Marshawn and Aaron.
Oh,
that was the team.
Oh, if you want to get down into like who came out, I mean, they got Antonio Gonzalez came out, or Tony Gonzalez, not Antonio. Tony Gonzalez came out back in the early parts of Cal. You know, legendary tight end with the Chiefs and the Falcons. Jared Goff, I remember watching him in a bowl game throw like, I think it was like 6 or 8 touchdowns on Air Force. Just stupid. Beat the brakes off of them. It was, Cal's produced, and then Aaron Rodgers.
My favorite's just Marshawn Lynch in the golf cart just driving around during the middle of the game.
It's such an underappreciated clip because I don't think people even know who that is when they see that clip. All right, well, past player. Florida State was the college. Came out in 2006 in the first round. Played for the Chargers, the Jets, the Cardinals, and then the Colts. So Chargers, Jets, Cardinals, Colts came out of Florida State. 2006 first round. 19th overall pick. You need offense or defense?
Yeah.
Defense. Now, this is during the San Diego time frame. They had, not moved to LA. But really good defensive player. I got 2 bigger hints that may give it away, but if you need them, I'm happy to pass them along.
Yeah, let's go with that.
The first big hint is on a Monday night game, I believe, he had some really big interceptions against Peyton Manning. One that was like one-handed snag was really impressive. And then if you need the second hint, I think he has 14 kids.
Oh, gosh. When he was with the Chargers, it wasn't Merriman was on that team. But was it a DB?
It was a DB.
Was it Cromartie?
It was Antonio Cromartie.
Man, that was a good one.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, he was really, really talented during that time period. But I remember that interception against Manning. That was, I think Manning threw like 3 picks that game. It was just one of those ones that I don't think anyone thought Manning was going to have a bad game. They were on a roll, went into San Diego, and just got abused that game. That was my everlasting. But then I also remember, I think he was paying at one point like $500,000 a year in child support.
Insane.
All right. Well, good job on that. You got um, both of those guys, and now going into the divisional round. So I guess we can start Saturday morning. Taking a look at the first game that happened. You got the Texans. You got the Ravens. My pick was the Texans when I did it with Maul. And at first, I will say, in the first half, I was like, this is exactly sort of what I feared for the Ravens, a super slow start. What did you sort of see in that game?
Yeah, I was I was texting you guys. The Baltimore defense was eaten, early from the very beginning, and it was pretty crazy. Watching that game because the Baltimore defense was exactly who they've been all year, and just watching them, uh, just give all sorts of fits to the Texan offense. You knew that they needed some form of kickstart, which I thought the punt return for a touchdown was going to be that kickstart to get that offense moving. But man, they just could not find a way to just move the rock in general. And then, yeah, all it took was for Lamar to get pissed off, and then we saw what happened in that second half. So that was my initial thoughts was, man, the Texans are legit. D'Amico is every bit of who we thought he was, and C.J. Stroud was, um, you know, very impressive for the season he's had as a rookie, and you could even compare him to just across the league. I mean, he's been playing lights out, and you would take him above most people if we had to choose today.
He played really well. I will say that you bring up that punt return. I think that punt return really sort of overshadowed in the first half how well the Ravens defense played.
Exactly.
And I know he was one of your guys. I really feel like the Bears should have paid him with Roquan Smith, but
Don't get me
him and
started.
Patrick Queen, dude, I think that's probably the best linebacker rotation in the NFL. The only one that I would say is comparable to it is Tampa Bay with Levante David and the guy at LSU. His name's escaping me right now. But I know that him being a prior Bear hurts a little bit, but dude, that team hits.
Yes.
And they gang tackle. That is a huge piece for me that you just sort of sit back and you watch them, and it's like I remember there was like a wide receiver screen pass, and I saw a defensive tackle come just flying in. Luckily, he didn't hit him or he murdered the dude. But I just sort of sit back and you look at that Ravens team. They flew around the football. They executed a defensive game plan that honestly it shouldn't be something that we brag about, but how they play defense is something that it's a sight to see.
Yeah, and Roquan, I was actually really happy. That was the team that I was hoping that he would go to. Just because they have the same kind of history, with a phenomenal defense like the Bears have. And as soon as the Bears weren't going to pay him, that I think that was his best landing spot, and it's shown. I mean, that man is the leader of the defense, and it's paying huge dividends for them right now. I mean, that defense is going to give all sorts of fits to Pat Mahomes in this upcoming week.
Yeah, I mean, the other linebacker I was thinking about was Devin White with the Bucks. The Ravens did a really good job of keeping Stroud from ever getting into a rhythm, and it also really forced them into longer downs, which is a big part of just effective tackling. Like I find that so many times guys they take a 2-yard gain that should be, if good tackling happened, they'll turn it into 5 or 6, and they make it so it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, and it just opens up a playbook where you can run a lot of intermediate routes, have tight ends, just do a little drag, running back in the flat. You can even run the ball and still pick it up. And by them putting the Texans into the position of being in 3rd and 6 and greater really helped them. The only thing that I sit back the Texans, and I know we're going to get into the Chiefs game here in a minute, at the very end when we talk about them versus the Ravens, the thing that the Texans did though, God, they killed themselves with penalties.
They did, yeah.
Dude.
And I think a lot of it too. I mean, the young team going into Baltimore, I mean, would they have 5 false starts just in the first half alone? I mean, it was not helping them to get any sort of momentum rolling, and I mean that kind of played into their long, late down and long yards to go situations.
For sure. I mean, it was drive killers for the Texans. There was multiple times that they sort of had some momentum. They were you could tell they were on the verge of having the Ravens sort of on their heels. False start. And even on defense, they had a couple offsides that were just killers for them. And that was the first half. The second half, it was clear words were said in the Ravens locker room, and they came out looking like the team that dismantled the Lions and the Niners and others throughout the year. They really, locked it up, and it was over from about midway in the third quarter. Like,
Yeah, we
they
saw.
looked really, really good.
Yeah, that that interview after the game, they're like, "So Lamar, what'd you say to the team?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's going to be inappropriate to say here, so I'm just going to leave it there." You're like, you knew, there were a couple of f-bombs, probably flying around and just telling guys to get their act together because that's not who they are. And I mean, we saw exactly who they are in that second half, and they were exuding confidence. I mean, I look back, Lamar missed the tight end Likely. He missed him. I can't remember if he underthrew him or what happened, but anyways, the defender was able to break it up, and he, no kidding, pointed up. Isaiah Likely pointed up to Lamar and like won the very next plays, threw that touchdown over the defender, the lob pass to Likely. I mean, they were in their rhythm in that whole entire second half on offense.
And the only thing for the Ravens that I sort of sit back and it's a major question with me going forward, and we'll get into it more when we break down the Ravens Chiefs game preview, is the Ravens running the football. Like, they have Lamar, and
Yep.
Lamar looks really good.
But that's it.
Yeah. I mean, Dalvin Cook had a good 19-yard run, and it's one of those ones that I know what Dalvin's capable of from his time at Minnesota, and he's shown that I think that he could easily come sort of like playoff Lenny from a few years ago with the Bucks, Leonard Fournette.
Yep.
That just sort of, it didn't have a great year. It wasn't a bad year or anything. It wasn't anything that you would write home about. And then the playoffs, it was just like, dude, this is different animal. Which the good thing for Dalvin Cook is he's healthy because he really didn't play that much at the Jets. So
he's had a whole season pretty much riding the pine behind Breece Hall and Carter, I think, up there in the Jets facility. And yeah, I mean, I think he was expecting to go in to the Jets this season and really be a maybe a number 2 back behind Breece Hall, and it just, for whatever reason, wasn't happening. So for him to come fresh into the playoffs, I mean, he provides another, I would say he's a pound for pound guy, that they need along with Edwards in the backfield with Lamar.
Yeah, if they can get Mark Andrews back, and the crazy thing is the guy that you were just talking about, and likely has been their backup tight end. They've sort of been splitting him out also in a wide receiver position. He has that athleticism. Andrews he was doing what Travis Kelce's doing now before Travis Kelce he was sort of that intermediary guy between Gronk and Kelce. If Andrews can come back healthy, that offense is, I would argue, is the best one in the league just because of the experience, and especially Lamar. I mean, I was going to ask Maul this, if he was able to join us today in talking about the one-on-one ability to tackle Lamar Jackson. I sit back and we were both sort of mentioning guys, and it's not from the standpoint I don't think they'd be able to get him down. I think that there's a lot of guys that can tackle him one-on-one, but if you just said, hey, 10 times we're going to do this, open field and see who can get him, for me, Ed Reed's the only guy that I would say more times than not he's going to beat Lamar. And that's saying something. Like, Lamar special. I know you were talking about Brian Dawkins, but you sort of think about all those safeties out there, there's no one in the playoffs. And that's sort of the point to all this, that I sit back and go, give Lamar open field and that dude's going to make the tackle. I don't see it on San Francisco. I don't see it on Detroit, and I don't see it against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They have, L'Jarius Sneed with the Chiefs, an All-Pro this season. So it'd be real interesting to see. He'll be locked up on probably Flowers if I had to guess. So, I mean, a lot of times he might be on the other side of the field, and I don't feel like the Chiefs have anybody, as a safety net back there to stop Lamar from juking them out of their shoes and taking off running, because that's your biggest threat. Yes, Lamar can hurt you with his arm, and I mean he is looking to throw more than he is to run. But how many times did we watch in the Texan games? He would drop back and do his dance for about 15 yards, and then still find somebody wide open to throw it to. So the fact that Lamar is such a threat with his feet, it's going to be a headache for Spagnuolo and that defense.
Yeah, and we'll break down the Texans more. We're planning on doing sort of a post the season, doing a division by division review. For example, we'll go through the AFC South. We'll talk about who finished first all the way to last, talk about who they're losing, what type of needs they need to fill in the offseason and stuff. I look at the Texans, and the Texans aren't going anywhere. Like Stroud's young, Tank Dell's young, Nico Collins. They have a lot of young guys. I can definitely see them. They have a lot of talented running backs out there hitting the market. There's talented running backs in the draft that now that you're not spending a first round pick on them, they're going to be able to go get. They need to address the defensive secondary. That was definitely exposed against Baltimore, but the future's bright in Houston. They found their guy. That's the hardest thing to do, is to find your guy that you sit back and you go, this is going to be my quarterback, and they got him. So I think the road looks bright for Houston. The fact that they even were in this game for a little bit really speaks to how well they came in prepared, which you were talking about with D'Amico. So, yeah, for me, on both sides of the ball, there's positives and negatives, but Houston definitely has a bright spot going forward.
Yeah, I think they definitely got to look at, what they're going to do in the running back position, because, I mean, Devin Singletary, he was a great, filler. And I honestly, he was a great starter all season, to say that. But there were games where their run offense was not there. They did not have that running back, and it was CJ who had to make all the plays on the offensive side. And then on defense, they've got enough of the young guys, thanks, to the Deshaun Watson trade there, being able to bring those guys in. They've got Stingley out there in the DBs, but they need to add more help for Stingley and bring in some more young talent for their pass defense.
Yeah. So that sort of wraps up that first game. And then the second game, which is the game that I think, if it surprised anyone, that was probably the most surprising one, is how well you can either look at it one of two ways, either how well Green Bay played or how poorly San Francisco played. I know there's going to be a mixed bag of emotions talking about this one from both of us. Because for me, I know I said it during text message, I'll go back to the Baltimore thing for just a second, because this really illustrates this point. I know that people want Lamar, and a vast amount of people have him as the MVP. Being a quarterback in the NFL, really, it's becoming a quarterback trophy just because that dude touches the ball every single play. And then you sit back and you look at Christian McCaffrey, who doesn't get to touch the ball every play, but still has the stats he has. I don't think there's any question that on the Niners offense, McCaffrey's the best player. And they would not get him the ball. And when they did, he scored. And it was just like, it's so frustrating under Kyle Shanahan's offense that I don't know what it is. They get into these playoff situations, and it's like the whole offense that we've seen all year, it's like they went away from it. And they're trying these we're going to do this. We're going to create these matchups. And it's like, dude, when the game's clearly not going your way, fall back on putting the ball in your best player's hands. Yeah. It's almost like they refuse to do that at times. And I know Purdy gets looked at for all the incompletions, the near picks. He wasn't having a great game. I can get that, but the play calling didn't help Purdy, and you got to put that ball in C-Mac's hand. What were your thoughts of that Packer-Niners game?
Yeah, I was honestly pleasantly surprised at how the Packers played, having to go on the road out there to Levi Stadium. And I think the thing for me, that kind of leveled the playing field was obviously the rain. It can be anybody's ball game when it comes down to the weather, as we saw, last week in Kansas City with the Dolphins freezing their tails off. The weather will benefit or will impact the game, especially something like rain where you can't hold on to that football to save your life. So there was an interview, that Purdy had talking about it. And he's like, look, it was raining. I was trying to do the best I could, but it just was not. I was having accuracy issues just because I could not grip the football. There was, hey, he was wearing a glove on the first drive, and then the rain stopped, so he took it off, and they were just going back and forth. And he's like, I was just unable to find that consistency to be able to throw the ball. But like you said, you know, not being able to find McCaffrey in the run game was very tough. I'm looking at the stat line now. He broke off that 40-yard touchdown. So you take that away, he had 98 yards. So you take 40 yards away from it. He's 50 yards of offense, is what you're giving the man who has carried the team on his back the whole entire season. Yeah, like you said, why Shanahan, would you move away from what you guys do best on offense? Because CMC is going to open up the game in which you've got Ayuk, Debo, Kittle. Like, you've got everybody out there, and Purdy's going to get them the ball, but you have to open that up with the run game first. On the Packers side, I think we all thought they were going to get stomped out of there, but the defensive line of the 49ers were not getting home, and I'll let you hit on that because I know you're just dying to hit on that. But they had opportunities. We were talking before this. They had 3 drives in the red zone. Their first 3 drives in the red zone on the road, and they only walk away with 6 points. Testament to the defense, but also there, some mistakes made there that Green Bay just wasn't able to punch it in. And if they could get up that early, it would have probably been a whole totally different game to where we don't even have to talk about the interception or the missed field goal at the end.
Yeah, I mean, what Pops is alluding to, which I would just go ahead and address, is the fact that for me, Nick Bosa has to be one of the most overrated defensive players that's remaining in the playoffs. I think his name gets brought up all the time. And it's not me saying that he's a terrible player or anything like that. Like, he's not a liability, but this idea that he is this game changer from the standpoint of he's going to be that guy that just takes over games like Aaron Donald does, like, you don't see it. Nick Bosa and Chase Young both each had 3 total tackles each, and 2 of those were solo each. So total, both of those guys had 6 tackles. And between both of them, they had 0 sacks. Like, I sit back and look at that stat line, and if you were to tell me that, the number 1 overall pick, or not the number 1 overall, but 2 guys that were taken in the top 3, I believe, in both of their drafts with Bosa and Young would be on opposing sides from one another, and they can't muster a sack between them, that to me that does not bode well going forward. Like, a defensive line that can get to the quarterback wins games. And, I know a lot's going to be made about it. Purdy threw 80 terrible passes and had no picks, and Love just let one rip there at the end that, for me, was the second he threw it. Like, I remember watching that Minnesota Vikings game where Favre's scrambling to his right, of all things, and throws across his body, and he gets picked by the Saints in the NFC Championship game, costs them a chance to go to the Super Bowl and end up facing, at the time, would have been Peyton Manning, and I think that's what everyone wanted. Love did the same thing. Now, Favre's was on 3rd and 15. Love's was on first down. And that, to me, was, a first-year player doesn't understand the down and distance, or just sort of the situation in itself that I don't need you to get it all. Like, just throw it away. We got 3 more downs. It's 4 down territory. We're going for it. Like, I just need you to not make that throw. It really sort of covered up how well he played that game. He tore apart San Francisco.
Absolutely.
And who's Green Bay got wide receiver again? Like, they ain't drafted a skill position on offense in Rodgers' time or in Love's time. Like, I just sort of sit back and I go, dude, this is not this team that has all this talent, and they looked the part. They had every little bit, if their kicker had made that kick, they're not driving down to try to tie it. They're driving down to try to win. Like,
Exactly.
it's just the Niners to me. Yes, they didn't have Debo. I know that something's going to be made out of that. And if you want to make something out of that, I'll go right back to when the Niners didn't have Debo and Trent Williams, and they looked really bad there for that stretch. People were sort of questioning whether or not they were even going to be a playoff team after they dropped 3 in a row. The Browns, the Vikings, and I forget who else they lost to during that time period. But the Niners, for me, have a lot of questions going into the game, which I know it's a different team they're going to play in the Lions. There's strength and weaknesses to both of those franchises in terms of the Packers and the Lions. But for me, the game was more about how bad San Francisco looked, especially on offense, for as much talent that they have. Putting it all on Purdy's not, the solution to me. I find that to be sort of a weak man's argument. In my opinion, they should have lost. If Green Bay's kicker makes that kick, I really do think that we're looking at a Lions-Packers NFC Championship game in Detroit come Sunday, which would have been amazing. But I don't know how in the world the Niners, they can't get any lower besides losing. They've really got to rely on McCaffrey going forward. But at the same time, if you watch that Detroit game, the one thing Detroit struggles with is the pass. So it really is going to be sort of Purdy's moment to shine, which I sort of want to go back to what you text us, your rankings for the quarterbacks. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So I can't remember which sports media output, out of the 4 remaining quarterbacks, who would you take? And my lineup was number 1 would be Mahomes, number 2 would be Lamar, number 3 would be Goff, and number 4 would be Purdy. Now, I will caveat, I did say that 3 and 4 could be interchangeable, but I would probably go with Goff just for the sake of him having the experience, been to a Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams. So for me, talking about that, I think we're going to see Purdy get into a situation, where he's not able to produce by himself. The Lions, Aiden Hutchinson has been able to he's been able to get home. I think the sacks, he's had 6 sacks, maybe 8 within the last quarter of the season. The kid's playing lights out, being able to get around and get pressure on the quarterbacks. And I think if you look at the lineup and between the scale from Mahomes down to Purdy, there's a lot of in between. There's a huge gap of talent that I think separates those quarterbacks. And it's pretty wild just looking at that. The first 2 are in the AFC versus the other 2 being in the NFC. And that says a lot moving into the Super Bowl itself, too, is that who's going to lead this offense. And I think the guys coming out of the NFC definitely are going to have a tough task once they get past the NFC Championship into the Super Bowl. So, yeah, that's where I stand on my top 4, or who I would take out of the remaining quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I know I said in the text that I didn't find him to be as interchangeable. I think Goff has proven he's already taken one team to the Super Bowl. I know that he didn't have a great Super Bowl against the Pats, for as Bill Belichick really frustrated him, which that's not the first time Bill Belichick has frustrated a young quarterback. He has shown the ability, and he's made some throws even with the Lions that I sit back and I'm like, that's the Goff that they went out and traded for. Like, he's made those type of decisions and really sort of been careful with the football. He got away with a couple in the Bucs game that could have been picks. But from the standpoint of the Buccaneers defense was bringing it. That is a very good defense. Todd Bowles knows how to coach a defense. They came after him. I just sort of sit back and look at it and I go, Purdy, on the other hand, doesn't have the experience in the playoffs that you want to see. And especially when it comes to, and I get he got knocked out against the Eagles. So this is sort of this first time that we're going to get to see, like, what is this guy capable of when it really matters to get the team to a Super Bowl? Because let me tell you, Lions are one game from the Super Bowl. Like, if you
Yeah.
think that they're not going to come in and bring it, they're going to bring it. I look at Purdy, and my biggest question is exactly what you sort of pose. What type of pocket do they give him? He's shown that if you don't get to him, he will light you up. But he's also shown that when you start roughing him up, that the outcome of the game is very much in question for him. Which I guess we can go right into with the Lions and the Bucks game. You know, for me, the Lions, they did. It's good to see. Like it was heartwarming. Like I feel like if you're not cheering for the Lions to win the Super Bowl, then you're a Bears, Packers, or Vikings fan. Like that's it.
You know, I'll put my plug in right there. You know, from the NFC North, the only team that I'm not really going to cheer for would be the Packers. I mean, I'd have my objections with the Vikings, but I'm rooting for Lions. We talked about it off script. You know, watching that Hard Knocks with Dan Campbell, like I would go to war for that guy tomorrow. I texted you. I said I'd go get beat up on the practice squad just to be around Dan Campbell. Like he just, the aura that man brings and his ability to change around that organization has been phenomenal.
For sure. Absolutely. Here's a trivia question. So this one's good. You already know one answer because I sent it out on the text. But the other one's a little bit more difficult. In this century, now that the Lions have made the NFC Championship, there are two and only two NFC teams that have not reached the NFC title game this century. Who are they? I gave you the answer in a text message making fun of them a few days ago.
Yeah, and man, it's drawing a blank on me now. Shoot.
What's the franchise that's easiest to make fun of and their fans?
Well, it had been the Lions, but they're
No, I'm talking about, they're the most hated fans in America.
well, Philly's they're pretty.
Let's talk about the Cowboys.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, the Cowboys, which is honestly unbelievable with the amount of talent that they've had, but that's discussion for another day. I'm stumped on the next team. Would it be no? Because
same division.
Well, it's not the Giants.
As the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's not the Giants. Commanders. Yeah, football.
It's the Commanders.
Yeah.
And to really, I mean, that just as a little side note, the tweet that I saw was the Lions in this century have went 0-16 and then went to a NFC Championship game before the Cowboys did.
Yeah. No.
Which is unreal. And then when you also throw into the section that the Commanders are the only other team in the NFC who hasn't done it this century, it really, for me, goes back to as much talent as Dallas has. What do both of those franchises have in common? A terrible owner.
Yeah.
Who made too many decisions for on the field, and Dan Snyder and Jerry Jones. That's the common link. Like both of those franchises haven't been. What's the common denominator? An owner who's way too involved. Like we'll go more. I can always take time to just dump on the Cowboys because it's so much fun to do, and I love doing it. But there's your little 5-minute spell of telling you why the Cowboys still can't make it.
Are terrible. Yeah.
But for the Lions and Bucks, on the Buccaneer side, I do want to say this. Mayfield played really good.
Yes.
I know he had 2 picks, and that last one was bad. Clearly didn't see the guy. Other one was a tip that got picked up. Baker played far better than anyone thought he was going to. If you had told anyone that Baker would have the ball with a chance to go to the NFC title game, people would have called you crazy.
Yeah.
Like, yes, the NFC South isn't a good division, but Baker played exceptionally well. What were your thoughts on Baker?
Man, I just bring up that meme that I sent out, or you guys sent it. I talked about it, but the fact that Baker was playing Scout Team D last year for the Carolina Panthers, and then this year now he's playing. He was one game away from the NFC title game. I think Bowles has stood up for it. He's like, I want to bring this guy back. Baker's our guy. They've obviously seen what they could get in the draft based on where they're sitting right now. And, Baker is going to be better than that guy. And I think he's proven it. I mean, they won a NFC South title. To go from the last team in the NFC South now to be sitting on top of it in one season is just, good for him. I know he gets a lot of flack from a lot of people, but the guy, I would argue, has had a career just the same as Justin Fields with so much change in his first couple of years that he's never really been able to get settled in somewhere with the same staff, and just to see, what he brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about what Baker had to deal with Hugh Jackson, Freddie Kitchens, an Odell Beckham who didn't want to be there. The best wide receiver you had was
Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, an older Jarvis Landry that wasn't in his prime.
Mm-hmm.
He brought Cleveland their first playoff win this century, and now he did it again with the Bucs. Like, you just sort of, I look at that and I go, Baker was the guy that should have been there, and like he wasn't this flop in my opinion. I know he didn't do as well as a number one pick that you hope he would. We were sort of talking about the other day. We're going to get into it in a different episode. I sort of talked about 3 different categories of guys that come out into the league, and for me, Baker falls into the category of the Jets, the Browns, and sort of the Lions, of category, which is these teams always go out and get a quarterback and they expect this guy to somehow to be the solution to the fact that they don't really have a roster. And then this guy shows up and gets murdered for 4 years and they're like, he was a flop. And it's like, no, he wasn't.
Yeah.
He just played on an absolute terrible team. And now that you gave him the wide receivers that Tampa Bay has, the coaching staff, you really saw progression for him throughout the year, which I think, like you just sort of mentioned, I believe is going to buy him at least another year or 2 in Tampa Bay to continue to grow.
For sure. I mean, you even look, he filled in, when Stafford got hurt last year. They didn't want to go anywhere else, and they picked up Baker to finish out the season for him, and that's what won him the contract in Tampa Bay. Was his play down the stretch under McVay. You think about that, the short term to play for a coordinator or a play caller like McVay, just to be able to, show signs of improvement or just the qualities that he got drafted for, they were still there. And that I believe that's why he got his opportunity in Tampa Bay and he seized it.
Yeah. And then on the opposite side, I sit back and I look at Goff. The running game, Jahmyr Gibbs, shows he really made all these pundits with ESPN and football talks that were like, I cannot believe the Lions. They took Gibbs way too high. This was stupid. What are they doing up in Detroit? And now everyone's sitting back and they're like, they made a pretty good pick. like clearly Detroit's draft was exactly, Detroit got the exact guys that they wanted and they nailed it. They got Gibbs, they got Laporta, they got Brian Branch, and they also took a Dan Campbell, or is it Dan or is it Jack Campbell, the linebacker? All 4 players, all 4 playing. Like, your 2 first and your 2 second round picks are starters. Like, you nailed a draft. You nailed it. And so I just sort of sit back and look at the Lions, and the only thing about the Lions that I sit back and I go, well, we'll see, is their secondary. Because Cameron Sutton got burnt in that second half. But I did pose the question to you before we started getting on the podcast, which is, I personally feel like that's the best wide receiver core that they'll see going forward, including the Niners and including whoever they face in the Super Bowl if they were to make it that far. Are there holes? Yeah. I mean, you brought it up a couple podcasts ago that Nick Mullins lit him up. Now, yes, he had Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Other teams got Debo, they got Christian McCaffrey. I just sort of sit back, and you talked about it with the hard knocks. The grit of this team is evident. Like, they're coming to fight. Like, that you're going to get a complete game out of them. But speaking in complete games, you sent this out, and it's been like under talked about. I feel that Tampa Bay has one timeout, Detroit takes a knee, and there's 30 seconds to go in the game. And you could have forced Detroit to kick a 48-yard field goal to go ahead by that point 11 to make it a 2-score game. And Tampa Bay didn't make that decision. And to me, it is the under talked about thing, because I think that is a huge foul for Tampa Bay. That you should have forced Detroit to kick. The dude, I think, from greater than 40 yards out, I know for sure he's less than 50%, but I want to say he was like 38% from that range. I just sit back and go, why did you not at least give your team another opportunity and let the time run out? But you sent that text out, and so I wanted to bring it up. That way you could talk about it.
Yeah. You look at it, and, analytics play a huge part of this game and everything. So who knows? Maybe Todd Bowles did know, and he's just like, hey, we got a 0.01 chance to win this game. Like, let's just call it. But when you look at it from that standpoint, you're like, there's no way a head coach, making millions of dollars would make a decision like that. He's going to play until the very last second. And I think it might have just been an oversight, that the guys just didn't realize that they still had one timeout remaining. I would like to know, what the clarification was with that. But yeah, man, like, you've seen crazier things happen. I mean, with 34 seconds, they kick a field goal. All right, there's maybe 6 seconds off the clock. We got time for 3, maybe 4 plays. If they make the field goal, the game's over. Copy, got it. But if they miss, now we're sitting here, we're at midfield. We've got a chance, just a little bit shy of midfield. But regardless, we're at midfield, and we've got 3, maybe 4 plays to get this ball to the end zone. I just think, that there was an opportunity that was potentially wasted, especially with guys, you alluded to it, the best wide receiver core that they've got, you still got a Baller and Mike Evans. You've got Chris Godwin, and then, Trey Palmer's coming out of, having, that deep threat presence with his speed. I mean, he caught that ball, man, and he jolted to the end zone. I've never seen somebody just breakaway speed like that, besides, Tyreek, obviously. That was impressive to see out of Palmer. So who knows? I don't think that they would still win the game, but I would have liked to see that shot taken.
I mean, I watched Patrick Mahomes take a team down the field in 13 seconds.
Exactly.
When I thought that game was over. No one thought that was going to happen. And honestly, I don't think the Chiefs thought it was going to happen. It was, they caught the right defense, which that's all it takes. Like, it just takes catching a guy in the prevent that sort of think the game's over. There's 30 seconds. Who cares? It takes one pass interference guy to get behind and tackle, and now the ball's inside of, it's a 30-yard throw to the end zone. Like, you just never know what's going to happen. I remember Aaron Rodgers throwing that Hail Mary against the Cardinals. Like, crazier things have happened late in games that to rob them of an opportunity. Yes, it really does result. You want to go back and revisit it with Bowles to just figure out, like, hey, why did this not happen? But the problem is that you got sports reporters that ask him the week prior that go, hey, it's really cold up in Detroit. How's your team ready to play in the cold? And he's like, we're playing in a dome. You know that, right? Like, that made me so mad seeing that. But from the Lions, like, Golf, when they needed a drive, they got a drive. Yep. The only drive they really sort of needed but didn't get is when they got the ball back with 5 minutes to go to really, like, take it down and win it. They didn't execute that and just sort of take it out of Mayfield's hands. Now, good thing is, and that's sort of the only thing I sit back with the Lions and what they did, and it really gives me pause for the San Francisco game, is they really went man zero. Like, they brought the house, left guys one-on-one. They played a lot of single high safety over the top. Now, if Debo's not there, 100% changes the whole flow of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't leave Debo one-on-one on Cam Sutton or McCaffrey one-on-one with a linebacker. You just can't do that and not expect for these big chunk plays to happen against a better team. Now, they got the Mayfield, and they made some sacks, and yet again, this is sort of where I go back to Brock Purdy, that the Lions have a chance because of Purdy in the game. It's a matter of, can the Lions execute? And we'll get to that here in a second. But first, we'll break down the big game, which was the Bills versus the Chiefs. And I'm just going to cut straight to it because of how mad it made me. I know that everyone is kicking the kicker, for lack of a better words, in Bass for missing that kick. But not enough people are talking about the fact that Josh Allen threw an 80-yard bomb in the air. Now, yes, it only went 60 yards, hash to hash, but 80 yards in the air, perfect bomb to Stephon Diggs, who's the number one guy who stood on the sideline and watched the Chiefs celebrate a few years ago, yelled at Josh Allen last year against the Bengals, and was a diva going into the season about how he wanted the ball more, and he put it right on him, and he dropped it. And I honestly think that if he catches it, he may just walk in.
Yes.
Like, dude, and for me, I guess I can just cut right to the chase. If I'm the Bills, I'm done with Stephon. Like, I get that he's a good wide receiver, but for the money that they pay him and the resources that it takes to keep a number one guy like that, he does not perform like a number one guy. I posted about it on the Instagram. The past 3 seasons, not just 3 games, but 3 seasons, and this is including the overtime thriller with the Chiefs in 2021, Stephon Diggs has not caught a playoff touchdown pass in the past 3 seasons. Like, he's just not produced. And when you sit back and you even think about, especially the great ones like Randy, you think about even tight ends. They're talked about a ton during the game with Travis Kelce. Him and Mahomes now have the most in NFL history in a playoff game of 16. Like, players of that caliber, when you're paid the number one guy, find a way to get to the end zone. Stephon can't get it done. And that, to me, was the game. Like, guys are going to make a lot about other things, but that was the game on offense for the Bills, is the fact that he couldn't reel in that pass. And it's under talked about in my book. But I'll let you talk about the Chiefs Bills after I got off my soapbox.
No, man, I really want to pile on to it because, that's the thing is you alluded to it. There was the whole discussion in the offseason, is there tension between Allen and Diggs? And then we saw it play out this whole entire season, where there's smoke, there's fire. And we just saw everything just kind of light up there towards the end. And he's just not catching the ball. I mean, I pulled up the stat line. He had 11 targets, but he only brought in 4 of them. So, for a guy who makes as much money as he does, it's just absolutely unbelievable that he's not producing more when it's evident that Allen is trying to get him the ball and try to get him going in these games, and he's just not showing up. Now, yes, he does have the prime moments when he was with the Vikings, the Music City Miracle that everybody loves talking about. That was old Diggs, but I do believe he's past that. I still think he's a phenomenal receiver, but I see him more as a, wide receiver 2 type guy. I don't think he's the number 1 guy anymore. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's because Gabe Davis is getting all the love in Buffalo. That might be an issue for them moving forward. My take on the game, yes, we always talk about the missed field goal. That's probably why the Packers lost. Obviously, why the game wasn't tied for the Bills as time was getting ready to expire. I mean, they still had a minute on the clock, but we see Josh Allen hugging Tyler Bass. So after the game, at least Josh Allen was like, "Hey, dude, it wasn't just on you." So that was cool to see out of a quarterback. Probably want to see Diggs go do that, but safe to say, I really thought that was the Bills' game to lose, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. Who's going to show up for them? you could say the injuries for the Bills played a little bit. Injuries on the defense played a little bit of an issue, but overall, I was impressed with who showed up at quarterback for the Chiefs. We've been missing this electric Patty Mahomes kind of all year in a sense. But once those lights get a little bit brighter, with the playoff atmosphere, I mean, the guy's just playing lights out right now, and they're going to be tough to stop. I think, they beat the Bills at home going into Baltimore. Baltimore's going to have their hands full. I think it'll be a matter of what the Chiefs defense is able to do, to combat the Ravens offense, because I think, Mahomes is a little too elusive, for the linebacker core there with the Ravens. But we'll see, man. As far as the overall game, you can kind of expand more on it. But I think the Bills, kind of let the opportunity slip away from them.
So in order to really tie that in to what I want to say, let's see if we haven't talked about this, so we'll see if you go with the same logic I have. The overtime game in 2021 versus them.
Mm-hmm.
What did you come away going, the Bills have got to fix this? Like, what was the big overall take? That if you were like, hey, in the offseason, this is what you got to address.
I mean, based on how good their offense was, I was going to say their defense.
Yeah, defense. Yeah. And so what did they go out and do last year? They went out and signed Von Miller.
Yeah, Von Miller, yeah.
I saved this stat because I wanted to just get your honest reaction to it live on air. Von Miller this season was paid $14.9 million. And in 14 games, he finished with 0 sacks and 5 tackles total. That's $2.98 million a tackle.
Wow.
And that, to me, that, like, the Bills sunk so much money into this one guy, and in that game, he didn't make a play. Like, for as many injuries as they have, like, that to me is the bigger takeaway for the Bills, is that since that game against the Chiefs, you knew your defense wasn't there. That you let a team drive down with 13 seconds left and kick a field goal, and then they took it right down the field and threw a touchdown. And the only guy that you went out and added was Von Miller, who hasn't lived up to expectations, was coming off an injury, and you knew that, and you still went out and paid him all that money, and now you're stuck with him. And that, to me, is the bigger crime. Like, I feel awful for Josh Allen because I think he's a baller. Like, I sit back, and for me, I really think the Bills, that's why I sort of say you got to get rid of Stephon Diggs. I think that they need to sort of do this clean house. Like, hey, all these guys outside of Allen, we're letting loose. Like, I'd keep James Cook. He looks good, and he's on a rookie running back deal. But Dalton Kincaid is amazing. They have their tight end.
Yep.
They got to go out and find some other guys and get help on that defense. And it was a travesty that for as much as I thought the Bills, this was their chance, Kansas City had looked down. I mean, to talk about the Bills, the first half, they did not stop the Chiefs. And it wasn't until the second half that, their 2 stops was Mecole Hardman fumbling the ball out of the end zone, which just completely encapsulates Mecole Hardman's entire career. It's a guy that has all this talent, but like every time he gets involved, you're just like, ugh, get it out of his hands. And then the next drive, that was the only 3 and out that they were able to force on the Chiefs the whole game. Like, the Bills defense sucked. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like, for a Chiefs offense that has looked as bad as they did, and then the thing, I was sitting here, Gut was over the house, and so he was watching the game with me. I don't know what it is, and I'm sure you've probably seen this too, and you sort of mentioned it, and I'll bring it back to it. I've never seen a game with the Chiefs in the playoffs that somehow a guy is not just wide open. Like, it's not like, I never found that Gronk just was running down the sideline all by himself. Like, Gronk made plays like with like 2 guys over him, like some guys like on his ankles, 3 guys getting hit to, helmet to helmet, and he still somehow caught it. Travis Kelce was wide open. And Absolutely. For me, I sort of go back to Nagy didn't call this game. Andy Reid called this game. Like,
that's what,
They tortured that Bills defense the whole game. And for me, it's less about Kansas City. We knew that Kansas City was capable of doing this, but from the standpoint of the Bills, dude, what a wasted opportunity
Yeah,
for your franchise and for Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I sent those messages to you, when they were struggling early in the season or about midway through the season. They had a spectacular finish, but I was in the boat of like, hey, I think their Super Bowl door has closed. There was for the couple of seasons there, starting in 20 up until now, like they had the opportunity, they had the team, at least the offense, being the powerhouse that it was. I think, the 2021 year, where they had that last minute shootout with the Chiefs was their best opportunity to get to the big game. And man, you just look back and you're just like, how could this happen? And I think it is. I think it's the bad deals, as we've mentioned. Paying Von Miller all that money, going into the this offseason with the off field issues, and then some more. All the charges and everything were dropped, but had more issues off season or during the season. And I mean, it's been a distraction, and he's not there. He's not playing. So, yeah, man, it's crazy. And then on the Chiefs side, I was thinking that same thing. I wanted to text you guys, but at some point I got to leave Matt Nagy alone. I felt like Andy Reid called that game 100%. Like there was no way in my mind that Matt Nagy had anything to do with that game plan.
Oh, the offense was completely different than anything we've seen this year from the Chiefs. Like they came out and played, which I think, as we're sort of wrapping it up, we'll get right into the two matchups that are come. You get Ravens Chiefs, which is the first game, which we'll talk about first, and then we'll go Lions Niners. For the Ravens, the good thing for the Ravens, in my opinion, is they have hitters. And I'm not saying this in terms of hurting Mahomes. That's not what I'm advocating for at all. So I want to clear the air on that. But Mahomes running as he has for the past few games and not getting hit, and it's clear he's taking advantage of a system that's sort of built to protect him. If I am John Harbaugh, I say if he is inbounds, you lay him out.
Yeah.
Like, under no circumstance should I see someone two-hand touch him. Like, he's known for running. If he runs, if he's inbounds, and if you think it's close, nail him. Like, make him think twice about holding on to the ball for that long. I think the Ravens will do that.
Well, and that's the thing. He's notorious. You watch any game when he's close to the marker, he reaches that ball out to try to stay in bounds. I mean, he's fair game right there in that moment. So, yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying there.
Because and it's not on this like notion of trying to get him hurt or anything. It's more just like if he wants to play and get every last yard that he can, which you just spoke to, then from a defensive standpoint, make him pay for it. You got to do that, because I sort of sit back and I look at the Chiefs offense, and outside of Travis Kelce and Simeon Rice, like MVS somehow caught a football, which is shocking.
Contested.
Yeah, contested. There's just not a lot of threats from the Chiefs offense. And then on the opposite side of the football, I look at it and I go, this is Lamar Jackson's chance to silence everyone. Because I think he's going to get multiple looks. They will blitz Lamar. And if he gets out of the pocket, I can see Lamar having over 100 yards rushing against the Chiefs. Like, that is the game. But the big thing for the Ravens is that I look in this game, I think it's the Ravens to win. They're 3.5-point favorites. For me, it will come down to when they get in the red zone. Can they get it 6, or are they settling for field goals? Because if you let Patrick Mahomes hang around and get to the fourth quarter, if it's within 7 points going to the fourth, Mahomes wins that game. I don't know if did you see that stat about his record in the fourth?
Nope.
Mahomes is 8-2 when down by more than 7 points in a playoff game. Who is his 2 losses to?
Tom Brady.
Yep, that's it. The GOAT. So I just sort of sit back, and for me, the Ravens, you got to put your foot on their throat in them. Like, if you want to run up 60 points, run up 60 points. Like, under no circumstance do you let these guys hang around. Now, good news is it's in Baltimore. Like it's not an Arrowhead. I think that's a huge advantage for the Ravens. It was an advantage for the Bills. The issue is the Bills defense, I think, is trash. And the Ravens defense, good luck. Like they're going to come with a game plan. It comes down more to me of can Lamar Jackson execute. If he can execute, the Ravens, I think, more than 10 points beat the Chiefs. What is sort of your prediction going in for the game?
Yeah, for me, I kind of already alluded to it. Their defense is so good in Baltimore right now. It comes down to, the backers on Pat Mahomes, because the receivers aren't going to have the ability to get open like they were, this week. Travis, yeah, we always talk about how, he runs his own routes and stuff like that. So that may be a kryptonite, but it's a matter of, if the Ravens are getting home to Pat, he's going to have the work cut out for him, and it's going to be a tough game for him. Lamar, all it takes is one missed tackle from Lamar, and he's gone. Willie Gay went down this past week. He was spying on Josh Allen, and Josh Allen was still running. And so you're looking at that. Now, Willie Gay didn't play the second half, but you're looking at that, and who from the Chiefs is going to be on Lamar? We've kind of talked about that, and I said L'Jarius Sneed, being cornerback, but he's going to be locked up on Flowers. You're going to tell me he's going to come all the way across the field and be able to make that tackle every time? No. So I think I don't think 3 points is kind of I think they kind of see it going either way. And I think that comes purely because they got Pat Mahomes for the Chiefs. But at home, I say the Ravens, yeah, they're beating them by a touchdown, in my honest opinion. I don't think it's any more than 10 points, but I could definitely see them winning by a touchdown.
I think exactly what you talked to is what the Ravens will do is they, under no circumstance, are they going to just let Mahomes sit there. Like any team that does that's dumb. You have to bring it. And you have to make him uncomfortable. Now, but you also, and that's why I just sort of say with him running, you have to be willing to just light him up. That if he takes off, hit him. And I think that will be the message from the Ravens this whole week is that under no circumstance you let this guy run. Don't let him extend plays. He's done it his entire career. You have to control that, which I think the Ravens will. I think they have the defense to do it.
I'm really curious to see, from that aspect, and Baltimore hits, and I'm curious to see how many roughing the passers or unnecessary roughness, we're going to see this week, trying to protect Mahomes. And I could honestly see, if the game is late in the fourth quarter or something like that, Mahomes does that little reach out for the first down, he gets blasted out of bounds. I could see that play being a game changer of how the game goes. And then we're in this discussion about, hey, the refs screwed this game up. I could see a play like that changing the outcome of this game, just because the defense is hitting everybody this year. Roquan Smith, we've already talked about it. I'm looking forward to him having, 12 tackles in this game, just being in on every single tackle.
For sure. And then the other game, which I guess the best way for me to lead this off is I think it is a game that everyone has finally gone to. Well, the Lions don't have a chance. I think everyone would love to see the Lions win, but I mean, Vegas has got them at -7. So I just sort of sit back and this, for me, this is I don't know if I sent you guys this stat. This is nuts. So the last time the Lions won a championship pre-Super Bowl, 1957. In order to go, didn't win a Super Bowl, the NFL championship at that point was 1957. To reach that game, they had to go on the road. They had to beat a team to get to the championship game. And that team was the Niners.
Yep.
So it's sort of nuts that history sort of repeats itself. I sit back and if you had to sit back and tell me like, hey, a team that's not supposed, I give the Lions a better chance to beat the Niners than I do the Chiefs to beat the Ravens. And it's just from that standpoint of like, I think that this team just sort of has that chip on their shoulder that like there's no expectations. We're not even supposed to be in this game. No one believes it's like them going into Kansas City to open the year, which I think now that game means so much more. If I'm a preacher of anything, I'm preaching that. You went into Arrowhead week 1 and you beat the Chiefs. You beat the defending Super Bowl champions. You're getting San Francisco in their home. You've done this before. Like, go in there and show this team who you are.
Yep.
And I think the Lions have a chance. Do I think that they're going to do it? No. I say that from the standpoint of their defensive secondary has really had some issues. And if Debo's not there, I give the Lions a way better chance. I just sort of sit back and I look at Christian McCaffrey. They have to do what the Packers did, which is you got to take McCaffrey out of the game. Like if they can stop the run and force Purdy to win the game, I think the Lions win. But the idea of shutting down, in my opinion, the best running back in the National Football League, that is a tall task. It's a super tall task. On offense, it's just about keeping pace. You just can't let them get out of sight in the first half. You can't let San Francisco get up 14. Like we've seen the Lions when they are down, it's ugly. So that to me is where I sit back and I go, that's how the Lions stay in this game. Sort of what's your takes going into the Lions Niners?
I'll tell you what, man. I'm really hoping that all the gibberish about the NFL being scripted isn't true. With the Super Bowl colors already representing the 49ers and the Ravens colors. I hope that not to be true, because honestly, man, I want to see Detroit in the Super Bowl. That is, it'd be great, for the game as a whole. I don't think that they get there solely based on, we've talked about the big plays that the 49ers offense is able to dial up. But who knows, man, because you already alluded to it, Kyle Shanahan, his play calling ability in the playoffs just seems like non-existent compared to what he is in the regular season. I mean, you got to think about it. He was the same offensive coordinator who allowed Tom Brady to come back from a 28-3 deficit because he could not get the ball to move, from the third quarter on in that Super Bowl against Tom Brady and the Falcons, or against the Falcons, excuse me. And so I look at that, and he's shown struggles in the playoffs with his play calling ability. And I think, if the Lions are able to jump out and keep that momentum going, two weeks ago, when I was on the podcast last, we talked about Aiden Hutchinson having to have the game of his life against Matthew Stafford. He's doing that. He is playing lights out. He's a Michigan boy. Michigan just won the national championship. He is as motivated as possible to bring Michigan even more joy than what they could have ever asked for in the last 30 years of sports, since the Pistons have been relevant. And I think, the Detroit Lions have nothing to lose. And that's Dan Campbell's message. He's like, boys, we did exactly what you talked about. We beat the Chiefs, the Super Bowl, reigning Super Bowl champs. Like, we have been here before. It's time for us to go show it. And what's really impressive, or what impressed me, was how the Lions were able to score in the last in the second half against the Buccaneers, because that was an issue. They only scored 3 points against the Rams after getting up so early in the second half. And so it was really a question mark of, were they going to lay an egg in the second half like they did against the Rams? And they put up 21. So I'm really interested to see the Lions repeat a full game from front to back, and hopefully they can upset them. I think it's a 3-point game if the Lions are in. I'll take the Lions by 3.
Oh, I hope. I would love to see the Lions go. I'd love to see the Lions go just from the standpoint of their ability to cash in and win a game would be, and to go to a Super Bowl, I think would love to see. The only thing I'll tag on to that, just because one of our good buddies sent me this text, the cheapest seat to get into the Super Bowl this year is how much right now?
I would say probably $5,000.
It's $8,900. That's before fees. Like, I just want to throw that out there. You know, it is a life. It is a goal of mine to go to a Super Bowl and get to witness one. And maybe after like 10 years of savings, I'll be able to go, which is sad to say that like I have to save for 10 years to be able to go to a game to watch it. Something's got to be done about the market. I know it's sort of capitalistic and no one wants to do anything, but the fact that if Detroit made it, that people are literally going to be selling it, you know, half their stuff to go to this game to watch.
Yeah, refinancing homes.
Yeah, it's a travesty. Like, we got to figure out the Super Bowl cost and at least to make it so, you know, I think about that fan who they keep showing during games that's had season tickets for 66 years.
Yeah.
And been through 0-16 and the worst parts of Detroit, that he would have to pay a minimum of pretty much $10,000 to go to the game by himself just for the ticket, not including, you know, the airfare, the hotel, the food, all that stuff that goes. I mean, it's a $20,000 trip when you start getting into it.
Yeah, and Vegas being upcharged because they know everybody's already traveling there for that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I just sit back and look at it and I go, what do you want from that team? Like, they need to have the ability for fans to go. It's an outcry. We'll get more in that later, but you know, I do appreciate you guys tuning on. That sort of wraps us up for the divisional round. We'll bring it back next week with the conference championships. Hopefully we're not talking just Ravens, 49ers. I got a feeling we will be. We'll see what the future has in store, but before we head out, anything else from you, Pops?
Yeah, hopefully my predictions play out better than they did for the wild card rounds.
As you're going to find out, it's hard to be right. Especially when it comes to just simple picking teams. Teams surprise you all the time. But I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. Go to our Instagram and TikTok, subscribe and follow us on there. And then for our podcast, you can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Go to our website, footballtalksquadron.com, for all other information. Do want to thank you guys for tuning in and for Pops joining us today. Look forward to seeing you next week. Time to pull chalks. We'll see you later.
See you.